Hello! Today we're going to be making a recipe out of this Better Homes and Gardens cookbook. It's called All-Time Favorite Hamburger and Ground Meats Recipes. It was published in 1980, and we will be making Russian fried pastries. Looking at this recipe, it looks like it's going to be runza-like. There's no cabbage and they're fried, so that looks like the main differences, but we'll see how different they are. I am having a hard time kind of reading this recipe. I think it's just written weird or not in a format I'm used to. Like, here's an example of the first few steps. In a mixer bowl, combine 1.5 cups of the flour and the yeast. In a saucepan, heat milk. 1 teaspoon of salt and sugar till just warm. Stirring constantly, add the flour mixture to the mixer bowl. Beat in low speed of electric mixer for 1.5 minutes, scraping sides of bowl constantly. See, I feel like they missed a step in there. Like, it should say, after milk heat certain temperature, pour into bowl. There's no step that says what to do with the milk after you heat it. I'm assuming we're heating the milk so it activates the yeast, because we're going to add yeast to the flour and then set it to the side for an hour for it to double in size. So that's why we're heating milk, but it doesn't ever say to add the milk to the flour and yeast. I'm going to put everything in this saucepan and put it on the stove and then get our flour together. 1 cup of milk. I'm using whole milk. It doesn't say what kind to use. And then 1 teaspoon salt. And then 1/4 of a teaspoon sugar, which is like nothing. I'm kind of surprised that there is that much salt. I mean, the sugar is for the yeast to eat, and the salt can kill the yeast if there's too much, which there's not a ton. I don't know. I just feel like that ratio is off. I don't know why. All right, all of our milk ingredients are mixed together, so we're going to throw those on the stove. I had an instant cooking thermometer. I can't find it, so I'm just going to put it on low. The goal is to just heat it some so that it activates the yeast. If you overheat it, you can kill the yeast. We're going to just put it on low and let it gradually heat up to warm. In our mixer, we're going to put 1.5 cups of flour and the yeast. I'm going to use a 1/2 cup 3 times. I don't know where my measuring cups are. My husband's been making a lot of pudding. I'm assuming that's related to why I can't find any of my measuring cups. All right, our 1.5 cups of flour is in the bowl. I'm going to add 1 package of activated yeast. Yeast and flour are in here. I'm going to give it a quick mix just to make sure they're mixed together well. Kind of doing it gently. I don't really want to compact the flour down. I have my dough hook on my mixer. It doesn't give any instructions for what kind of head to use with your mixer, so I went with dough hook. I figured that was a safe bet. It does say to stir the milk constantly. I obviously haven't been doing that because I've been over here mixing my dry ingredients. I'm not sure why we need to mix it constantly. The sugar has been settling to the bottom, especially while the milk's still cold. I'm assuming as it heats up some, it's going to kind of help dissolve that sugar. I would guess the stirrings to help with that process. I'm going to go over there and keep it stirred, make sure the sugar is mixed in. Since I don't know where my thermometer is, I'm keeping an eye on the temperature by taking my spoon out and kind of touching the milk on there to see how hot it is. Be very careful while you're doing that. You don't want to accidentally burn yourself. I'm only doing it because I'm keeping a good eye on it, and it's so low that it's not going to heat up super drastically to the point where I'll miss where it's super hot and accidentally burn myself. Also, if you're going to use this method, I recommend putting your hand right above like the spoon or the surface of the milk to kind of feel if there's heat coming off of it. That'll give you a good gauge if it's going to be dangerous for you to touch or not. I pulled our milk off the heat. I don't think it's as hot as it's supposed to be. It's definitely warm. I was afraid of letting it go any longer because I don't want it to be so hot that we kill the yeast. So I'm going to slowly pour the milk into the flour while the mixer's going. I'm gonna put it on a low speed. The milk's in. There's some flour sticking on the sides, so I'm just gonna scrape it down here for a little while. It says to beat on a low speed of an electric mixer for a half a minute, scraping the sides of the bowl constantly. I don't know that I trust myself to scrape the sides of the bowl while the mixer is going, so I'm just going to let it do its thing. I did mix it pretty good just now, so hopefully that makes up for that. Okay, that was mixed for half a minute. While that was mixing, I measured the rest of the flour out into this bowl. It says that I'm going to need to beat this on high for 3 minutes and stir as much of the remaining flour in as possible. The whole recipe calls for 2.5 to 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and we've added 1.5 cups. It just says add as much as you can, so we'll see what that means, I guess. Then we're going to put it onto a floured surface. I'm just going to use the flour that's left over from mixing it in to flour my surface, because it says to knead the dough into a firm dough ball. If I need to add more flour, I will, but it's going to absorb the flour from the floured surface. So in an effort to not put too much flour into it or to try to not waste flour, that's what I'm going to do. When you're adding flour to the mixer on high, a lot of flour gets kicked up onto the sides. So I'm just going to go through really quick and knock that down and then continue to mix it. I did stop and kind of push the sides down another time. I don't think this is the best method for adding flour. I would almost say beating it at a lower speed might be better. I feel like it just throws a ton of flour up when you're trying to add flour on high speed. This is how much flour we're left over with. So I'll knead the dough into that. I do have my flour container on standby if I need it. Just spread that out a little bit. Make sure you clean your surface before you knead dough on it. There's our nice little dough ball. I'm going to take some of this flour from around it and pour it on top so that when I put my hands in it, they don't stick immediately. But let's start kneading. I'm kind of kneading it how you would knead clay, kinda. So I'm more or less putting it in a ball and then spreading it out, and when new sticky dough is exposed, I'm flipping it over into the flour pile and then balling it up and repeating process. Once a lot of the sticky dough is out, you can stop flipping it over every time and just kind of knead it out like that. I don't know that this is the 100% correct method, but I think it'll work. As you can see, it got most of the flour off of my surface. There's not a lot of flour left, so it is taking on a lot of the flour from the surface. That's why I was nervous to add more flour than what we needed to. I'm going to have to roll these out anyway to fill them with meat, and we'll be adding more flour then. All right, we have most of our flour up. I'm just going to kind of form him into a cute little ball. And we need to grease a bowl. All right, here's our bowl. I'm going to add a little bit of oil to it, not a ton. I'd say that's maybe like 1.5 teaspoons, maybe a tablespoon. I don't think it's a full tablespoon. All right, I'm going to take a paper towel. You can use a napkin or a washcloth or something. Just make sure it's clean. And spread that oil out up the edges. Make sure it's well covered. It says to put our little dough ball in there and then flip it once to make sure both sides are greased. There she is. Then we're going to cover it and put it somewhere warm for about an hour. You can use a dish towel or something along that nature. With my animals, the hair seems to cling really well to the dish towels. That makes me nervous to put them over dough just because the animal hair does cling so well to them. So we're going to use plastic wrap. Set that to the side. Ignore my old beat up skillet. It's seen some stuff, but that's fine. Our next step is to add half a pound of ground beef or ground pork, half a cup of chopped onions. They are kind of coarsely chopped because they were very potent and I didn't want to put a lot of effort into chopping them. And 1 garlic clove mince. I'm going to use garlic, and it says to use half a teaspoon to equal a clove of garlic. We need to cook until the meat is browned and the onion is tender. I'm going to just kind of break up the ground beef here really quick. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit, kind of mixing this on and off until that hamburger is where we want it. Okay, our hamburger mixture is almost done. It's looking pretty good. I'm still going through and trying to break up any of the bigger chunks of hamburger I see. I do believe our hamburger is done. I don't see any more pink in it, so I'm going to go drain it really quick. Just drain the grease off of it and return it to heat after I'm done with that process. Just a reminder, hamburger grease can be really bad on your plumbing. My house was built in 1890 and our pipes are ancient. So how I drain the grease off of the hamburger is I put it in the strainer and then let the grease drip out into a bowl underneath. This time I used the mixing bowl because I'm not going to use it again. I'm going to let that bowl sit there until the grease cools down, and then I'll pour it into the trash can. Once it's cooled down enough, I won't start the trash can on fire. Okay, our hamburger is drained and back on heat. So now we need to add some stuff to it. We need to add some tomato sauce, a half a cup. I'm just going to mix that in quick. This is the tomato sauce I use, just the cheap Walmart brand, nothing fancy, not like spaghetti sauce, tomato sauce, just this. Then 2 tablespoons of snipped parsley. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I took a guess. Then 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese. I went with the fake, not real cheese, Parmesan cheese. I feel like this is more accessible to most people. Most people have this in their house, so. Then 1/4 teaspoon of salt, nothing fancy, just iodized salt. 1/4 teaspoon ground cinnamon. The next thing is 1/8 teaspoon of ground pepper. I'm just kind of guessing, I don't have an eighth, so I'm using 1/2. Then 1/8 teaspoon of ground ginger. It just says now to mix to combine and heat thoroughly. It looks pretty well mixed to me, so I'm going to remove it from heat now and get set up to roll the dough out to put it in dumplings. Our dough has been rising for about an hour. I don't know that it's doubled in size, but it's gotten pretty close. I'm putting it on a floured surface. I'm going to be using this mat from now on because it has these nice measurements on here. And it's going to ask us to measure the dough out into certain size pieces. So I went ahead and just got this ready. We're supposed to shape it into 12 balls. So what I'm kind of doing is very gently trying to not push all the air out. Just kind of put it into a loaf shape so it makes it easier to make sure I'm getting kind of even portions. I'm just going to use this dough knife here and cut that in half. That wasn't perfectly half, but okay. And then kind of shape them into little loaves again. Put that one to the side. And then try and cut each one of these sides into 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there's 5. Alright, I have mismeasured. So we're gonna do some creative trimming. The middle pieces are the biggest. So I'm just gonna cut a little extra off of them. And that one's pretty big. Try and have them form their own little bowl. They're not perfect, but they're kind of close. We'll do this next portion here. I don't know that they were better. Here's our little dough balls. We're going to let them sit for, it says 5 to 10 minutes and let them rise again. Once they've risen, I'll kind of scoot them to the side and we'll start rolling them out. It's been about 5 to 10 minutes, so we're going to start rolling these out. I'm just going to make sure the center here has a good amount of flour and I can still see my lines. I'm going to flour my rolling pin. I'm going to flip. I don't really like that. It's a little over the 5-inch mark, but I'm okay with that. All right, and we need to put 2 tablespoons of the filling in here. It says also to use your finger and some water and wet the edges of the dough here. Okay, it says to bring the dough up around here, and it wants us to kind of pleat it, kind of like that, I think. They have one picture of what they're doing, and it's a not great illustration, is how I would describe that. Like that. I mean, it looks like a dumpling. It says there is a reference photo on page 36, so I'm going to take a look at that. Yeah, it's pretty close to the reference photo. And then set it to the side. Then we repeat that process 12 more times. Switching to a pastry brush, I just think it's easier. Our dumplings are done. That's what they look like. They're starting to raise a little bit, the ones I did first. One of them is understuffed because I didn't have enough stuffing to fill it, and then I have enough dough over for one more, so I don't know what happened. I don't know why that is. Our next step here is to put the dumplings in oil that's been over medium. We're supposed to put them seam side down. It says to do 6 at a time. And then it says to turn it down a little bit to like low medium. And then cover them and cook them for 8 to 10 minutes. It's been 8 minutes. It says to cook them until golden brown, which it looks a little, maybe a little more than golden brown. But, alright, and then flip them over and then cook again for 8 to 10 minutes on this side. I'm probably going to turn the temperature down a little bit. Just trying to spread them out so that they don't crowd each other, but they're in the oil. Yeah, I'm probably going to turn it down a little bit, and then we'll repeat this process and see what they look like in another 8 to 10 minutes. Our timer's gone off. They're looking pretty good. I'm going to put them on a drying rack that has a plate and paper towel under it so that they can dry some of that extra oil off, and then we'll put our next ones in here. It says to keep these warm while the next batch is going. I don't know how they expect me to do that. It says you can add more oil at this step too if you need. It doesn't look like I need to, so I'm just going to throw these in. Our extra little dough, I just kind of flattened it out and decided I was just going to fry it like that. See what happens. Alright, we'll cover those and see in a little bit. All of our dumplings are out of the fryer. I'm going to let these cool down some. Here's our little piece of just fried bread. I took it out at the 4-minute mark because there's not a lot to it. We'll see how that tastes.